we have strong evidence which shows that unless Israel is stopped through meaningful action, it is well on its way to carrying out the slaughter of all Palestinians in Gaza. The so-called 40,000 number only takes into account those who are killed by direct fire and not who are killed in an indirect manner. It does not actually represent the number of people who have been killed in Gaza. It only takes into account people who have been identified due to the sheer amount of mutilation, dismemberment of Palestinian bodies. Many Palestinians in Gaza have remarked the luxury of being found as a whole dead body. Those who have disappeared. And so there is no body. Thousands of Palestinians have been subject to torture, and some of them have been killed. It includes children who are potentially being trafficked. People don't need to wait for the Lancet to say it in order to potentially believe it when a Palestinian woman who has carried out essentially largely the same analysis weeks before believing Palestinians when we comment on our own lived experiences. Hello and welcome to episode 124 of the Palestine Pod, the weekly podcast where we break down the latest headlines dealing with Palestine from all over the world and bring you stories, commentary, and interviews with the aim of supporting the Palestinian struggle for decolonization, justice, and equal rights. I'm one of your hosts, Lara E. You might know me from Instagram as @GazaGirl, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mikey B.
What's up, y'all? Mikey B on TikTok, Michael Schertzer on Instagram, and you can call me Mikey Intifada if you were all upset about a Ukrainian children's hospital being bombed, but you still are peddling the lie that Palestinians bombed their own children's hospital.
Before we get into today's episode, please like, comment, and subscribe if you hang out with us on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast app, subscribe and leave a review. As always, you can find our full episodes and sources on PalestinePod.com. And if you want to get involved in the conversation, reach out to us at PalestinePod@gmail.com and give us a follow on Instagram @ThePalestinePod. Find us also on Patreon, where you get early access to the Palestine Pod episodes and additional podcasts per week. It's called the Patreon Pod. It's a little more laid back. We talk politics, Palestine, pop culture, and get a little more personal. We're also hosting our monthly Zoom happy hours with our Patreon subscribers only. So check us out on patreon.com/PalestinePod. Do you remember in October?
Never heard of it.
Never heard of October. I was thinking about the first episode we did after October 7th, which was in November. And I don't know if you remember, but in that episode, we were describing, just in a totally shell-shocked state, what we had witnessed in the past several weeks since October 7th. And the episode that we released first was on November 10th. And I remember very specifically that in that episode, I at one point make the remark that Israel is killing everybody in Gaza. And it may have seemed like hyperbole at the time, but the more time passes,
actually, it did not seem like hyperbole.
Okay.
It seemed like a measured, reasoned assessment of the actions committed by this genocidal regime.
Right. Yeah. Or at least, in terms of where it was clear that it was going, based on the expressions of genocidal intent at the highest levels of government, based on the way that those expressions of intent were also carried out by those wearing the boots on the ground, and also, dropping the bombs from above, to extending to various parts of their society, the pervasiveness of this rhetoric, and the fact that it seemed like at that point in time there was, which unfortunately has proven to be true, at that point in time it seemed like there was no external force that was willing to step up and stop Israel from carrying out this slaughter of the Palestinian people.
The only people who were willing to step up and stop it were the indigenous homegrown resistance.
And now 9 months later, we have strong evidence which shows that unless Israel is stopped through meaningful action that requires it to comply with its international obligations, it is well on its way to carrying out the slaughter of all Palestinians in Gaza. Why do I say that? A couple of weeks ago, the Palestinian author, Susan Abulhawa, came out with an article, The Electronic Intifada, where she revisited the number of Palestinians killed, this famous 40,000 number, which continues to be reported on in the media as the number that is being quoted by the so-called Gaza Health Ministry. And she basically said that that number does not actually represent the number of people who have been killed in Gaza 9 months in to this genocide. And she goes through to provide a series of reasons why this number is not accurate at all in terms of representing the actual number of people who have been killed by Israel. Just to highlight some of the things that she said, she basically said, well, one of the reasons why is because that number only takes into account people who have been identified by name and also by civil ID number. And so, of course, that excludes people who have not been identified by name and civil ID number, which, of course, is probably many people, given the fact that a lot of people cannot even be identified once they've been killed due to the sheer amount of mutilation and dismemberment of Palestinian bodies because of the brutality in the ways that they're being killed, the weaponry that's being used against them, as we have seen in many of the videos that come out on a daily basis, results in Palestinian bodies being found as limbs. And many Palestinians in Gaza have remarked and have written even about the luxury of being found as a whole dead body, right? So all of those people who end up as detached limbs, as fingers, as hands, as legs, we don't actually know who they are, and they're not being counted. For example, if you guys remember months ago when Israel was dropping 2,000-pound bombs on Jabalia refugee camp, and entire city blocks filled with residential buildings had been turned essentially into craters and dust, and there was literally nothing left. It resulted in hundreds, if not thousands, of people literally being erased in a moment, turned to dust. There is simply no way to seriously argue that only those people who are killed by direct fire and only those people who are identified as such represent the actual number of those that are killed as part of this genocide. Suzanne also made the point that the so-called 40,000 number only takes into account those who are killed by direct fire and not who are killed in an indirect manner, but who are certainly killed as a result of the genocide. So those include people who have chronic disease, for example, that would have been managed but is no longer managed because of the fact that there's now a siege. And the Israeli siege on Gaza prevents the most basic medical necessities from entering Gaza, including medications, including anesthesia. So those people as well are those who have been killed as a result of the genocide, but which are not being counted in this number. There's also the question of those who have disappeared. And so there is no body to identify by name and by civil ID number because the person has essentially vanished. And those people can be, many of them may have been taken, kidnapped by Israel and are being tortured now as a part of the experiment that we know is taking place where, thousands of Palestinians have been subject to torture and some of them have been killed as a result as well. Some of them have been kidnapped and we don't know anything about them. We don't know if they're even in that facility. We don't know. We just have no news. This includes children who are potentially being trafficked as well and who have been kidnapped. And this was reported on by the Euromed Human Rights Monitor. So there's a whole host of categories of people who have been killed as a result of this genocide, but who are not being counted as a part of this figure.
Also, thousands of people who are still under the rubble because the occupation bans the appropriate machinery to clear rubble to search for bodies. So people are literally digging by hand. I saw a video of a girl digging herself out of the rubble. And so those people are also not accounted for. Then there are the starvation and malnutrition numbers, of course. And back to the prisoners, the Shin Bet, which is like the Zionist FBI, they recently upped the number of Palestinian prisoners to 21,000. Previous estimates said that it was 10,000. So that is literally over double in just a press release. And it's like, if they just over doubled it, like overnight, do we trust those numbers, right? Palestinians locked in these concentration camps, these dungeons, being tortured to death, being raped, being anally penetrated by a electric rod, being raped by dogs. Like, there's a lot we don't know, and there's a lot in the shadows, and only a fraction of it gets reported on.
Right. So if you go back to the Electronic Intifada article that Susan Abulhawa wrote, Suzanne concludes after carrying out this analysis that the true numbers of those who have been killed in Gaza as a result of Israel's genocide, now we're looking at nearly 9 months in, as she wrote this at the end of June, is closer to 194,768,000 to 511,824 people. Extremely shocking to hear that the reality might be closer to Israel even having already killed 1/5 of the people in Gaza, right? But many of the after Suzanne published this article, some people were critical of it, saying, "Oh no, that can't possibly be true. Oh, this is an exaggeration," so on and so forth.
What? Can you believe people gaslit Palestinians?
Right. So, not even a couple of weeks after Suzanne posted that article on Electronic Intifada, the Lancet, which is one of the most prestigious medical journals, peer reviewed in the world, published a study a few weeks after Suzanne's article was published, corroborating the estimates that she has made. And I'm going to read just a little bit from their analysis. So, what they say is that the cumulative effects of Israel's war on Gaza could reach more than 186,000 people. Okay, now here we are again, a far cry from this figure that hovers around 40,000 and which has essentially not increased in any substantial manner in the last several months. The study points out that the death toll is higher. Why? Because the official toll does not take into account thousands of dead buried under the rubble and indirect deaths due to destruction of health facilities, food distribution systems, and other public infrastructure, which is again very similar to the way that Suzanne carried out her analysis. Al Jazeera points out that conflicts have indirect health implications beyond the direct harm from violence, and that even if the so-called Gaza war ends immediately, it will continue to cause many indirect deaths in the coming months and years through things like disease.
Turns out people need clean water to live and food. Can you believe that? Lack of access to food, water, and medicine is a catalyst for epidemics, pandemics, and mass death. It's like so fucking obvious. You don't have to know how to read a medical book.
Yeah, and also people don't need to wait for the Lancet to say it in order to potentially believe it when a Palestinian woman who has carried out essentially largely the same analysis weeks before may not have been believed because she's Palestinian, right? And so this also goes back to believing Palestinians when we comment on our own lived experiences. And not only that, but believing that we are also capable of being experts on subjects, that we're capable of analysis, that when we present evidence and we make arguments, that you assess the evidence for what it is, and that you don't say, oh, well, this can't be true, right? Because, you're Palestinian, so you must be biased. The evidence speaks for itself. And the evidence is precisely what was cited by the Lancet in its own analysis.
You know who is biased are the people who have been repeating the same number for like 6 months. The people who have goofy ass gone on television and been like, the death toll's the same as it was in January, and we've seen Palestinian bodies stacking up.
Yes.
Shout out Pierce Morgan, bitch ass.
The Lancet study said that the death toll is expected also to be far larger given that much of Gaza's infrastructure has been destroyed. So no surprise here when people have no housing, no infrastructure, no shelter to protect themselves. That will also expose them to risk of premature death. They say that in recent conflicts, indirect deaths range from 3 to 15 times the number of direct deaths. Then they apply a conservative estimate of 4 indirect deaths per 1 direct deaths, which again is literally on the very conservative side of this as compared to previous conflicts globally. They say it's not implausible to estimate that up to 186,000 or even more deaths could be attributable to the so-called Gaza war, the study found. That number alone would represent 8% of Gaza's population prior to October 7th. Now, that of course is assuming that everything stops today and that you limit or you stop the number of indirect deaths that would continue otherwise to accumulate, which of course is not the case. So even this 186,000 number is not is not the final number, right?
A lot of people are accepting this 186, and we need to stress that that is a conservative estimate to give the amount of loss of Palestinian life. People should be freaking the fuck out. People should be like finding their local politicians in the restaurants they go to and beating the shit out of them. Like,
Yeah. I don't know if we can say that though. You have to make it funny. Otherwise, we can't say it's funny. You have to make it funny.
okay,
Because otherwise it sounds like an instruction, and that's
yeah, let me think of a joke about it.
that could be it. That's the joke.
Yeah, the joke is it's a joke, and I'm not instructing anybody to do violence, obviously.
Okay,
And
now it
you
sounds like
shouldn't
you are
take
again.
a comedian seriously.
Now it sounds like you are again. And I
I'm
don't know if
based in America. In America, you can say beat the shit out of your politicians.
I don't think you can.
Let me see. Let me check real quick.
I think that's like calling for are we gonna do it?
No, you cannot assault federal or state politicians because that is like a federal crime. But your local politicians, beat the shit out of them. I don't know if that's true. I'm giving bad legal advice.
Wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, don't get your legal advice from Michael, people. Yeah, please consult counsel. I'm trying hard to fix this. Please follow all laws.
Boo. Find your local politicians and make them uncomfortable, whatever that means to you.
Yes, as long as it complies with all laws.
Shut up.
Wait, no, I like that. Make them uncomfortable. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I
Yes.
like that. That's good. People should be uncomfortable.
Find your state and federal officials and make them uncomfortable too. Everybody should be feeling the pressure of 1 in 12 people disappearing conservatively. Okay?
Yes.
Let conservatives hear about that.
Yes. The Lancet study also noted Israeli intelligence services, the UN, and the World Health Organization all agree that claims of data fabrication leveled against Palestinian authorities in Gaza over its death toll are implausible. So even Israeli intelligence itself is saying they're not making this up, right? And they're the ones doing the killing. Now, in parallel, we also know that the US House of Representatives voted to block the State Department from using that completely unrealistic 40,000 people killed Gaza Health Ministry statistics. And that amendment passed in a 269 to 144 vote. And that was at the end of June. So what we're seeing here is at the same time that we have evidence from Palestinians, from the most prestigious medical journal in the world, that states that the number of Palestinians killed in Gaza as a result of this ongoing genocide is conservatively at least in the high 100,000s. At the same time, you see the US government seeking to ban reliance on a figure, which is far less than that, on the premise that that number is not likely to be accurate. What we see here is genocide denial on the part of the United States, which has a clear interest in ensuring that this genocide denial is taking place because they are the ones which are funding and arming and providing the intelligence support for this ongoing genocide. And so what they're doing is, instead of changing their own behavior to comply with their own international obligations under the Genocide Convention, they're essentially making it illegal to speak about the people that they're killing as a result of their unlawful behavior. It is an incredibly difficult time to be Palestinian, because what this means is that not only are you watching your family be massacred, your friends be massacred, the place where you're from be completely erased. And if you're Palestinian on the ground, you are first and foremost living this and surviving this. And every day you survive, you're surviving one more day of this genocide, just hoping and praying that it will be over. But as Palestinians, you're constantly being told that your lived experience or the lived experience of your family members, your friends, your community is not actually taking place, despite the fact that you're watching it happen in real time at all hours of the day. And you're prevented from even talking about it. You're prevented from saying, no, 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 they're killing all of us. They're literally on their way to killing all of us. So what does the US want Palestinians to do? When will we be allowed to talk about the fact that they're killing us en masse? Do we have to all be killed in order for us to make the statement that this is happening? Is it even relevant for us to, at that point, talk about it? Isn't the point for us to be able to stop it from happening, to save people's lives now? Netanyahu said from the very beginning that the point was to, quote, thin out the population of Gaza. And he is doing that. He's absolutely doing that by having now potentially killed anywhere between 180 some thousand Palestinians to 500 some thousand Palestinians. But when will it be okay to talk about it? When we know the numbers for sure, when the dust settles and the numbers are what, 1 million, 1 million and a half, 2 million?
Meanwhile, you have Zionists doing Holocaust genocide denial, trying to gaslight Palestinians and invalidate their lived experience by saying, oh, no, 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 it can't possibly be that many.
The US approach also has been weird for another reason. Because you had the Biden administration come out and say, Israel's not being careful enough. It's not doing enough to protect civilians.
Understatement of the century. It's like, I mean, the fuck? That's like saying big oil doesn't give a fuck about fish. Like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, big oil's not doing enough to protect.
It's like, no shit, it's fucking drilling in their homes and murdering them.
Right.
Who gave that analysis? Mr. Magoo?
No, I wish. It was John Kirby, who is just despicable.
Somebody should introduce John to the Kirby. That's fire, because that's a joke.
Yeah, that is. I know. It's pretty good. Hepatitis A outbreak, in addition to outbreaks of skin disease and other diseases, which are infectious diseases, which are contagious. And so, no, it must come as a surprise to nobody that it can't really be good for your health to live in a 110-degree tent all day with your newborn and have access to no water and no formula. And that if you have to walk for 6 hours to find dirty water every day to survive under the threat of bombs or sniping, that is probably like not good for your health. No, what does John Kirby say? He said, Israel can do more to protect civilians in Gaza. The Israelis have taken some steps to be more precise, more discriminate, and more careful in their operations. Is it enough? No. So we're going to keep at it. We're going to keep working on this.
Just today, there was an article that dropped. There was an article that dropped from 972 Plus, which is kind of like a liberal Zionist rag, but they dropped a good article today where they exposed that Zionist terrorists will literally just shoot because they're bored. That's coming from their mouth. They're like, I was bored, I just shoot.
Yeah, because that's not even like you, again, exaggerating. Literally, the title of the article is, quote, I'm bored, so I shoot, end quote. The Israeli army's approval of free-for-all violence in Gaza. Israeli soldiers describe the near total absence of firing regulations in the Gaza war, with troops shooting as they please, setting homes ablaze, and leaving corpses on the street, all with their commander's permission. Check it out. Very fascinating. But that also goes back to something which we've been discussing for months now. And in fact, we covered it most on the episode with Hala, where we commented on this phenomenon of seeing Nakba being carried out for the purpose of entertainment, that there was entertainment value in what we were seeing, the killing for entertainment's sake, the destruction for entertainment's sake. And this is corroborated by the TikTok videos that are posted by the soldiers themselves, showing themselves blowing up the homes, making skits. They do like comedy skits to blow up a family house in Gaza.
They do not do comedy skits.
Well, they think they're doing comedy skits. Like they act out things. Like that's what you see what I mean? Like
I know what you're saying. Comedians take offense at the idea that what they're doing is comedy.
let's be clear here. It's not funny, but they think they're being funny because they find it entertaining to destroy them being, playing with dead children's toys in their homes, where the child has been certainly displaced and maybe killed and maybe starved, or trying on Palestinian women's lingerie. All of that was part of this phenomenon of seeing Nakba take place and be carried out by Zionists as a form of entertainment. And the 972 piece, which just came out, really is just an extension of that and confirms that. But in any event, let's go back to John Kirby. He says the Israelis have taken some steps to be more precise, more discriminate, and more careful in their operations. Is it enough? No. So we're going to keep at it. We're going to keep working on this. So I have like 2 or 3 things to say about this. One, how exactly is somebody supposed to carefully drop a 2,000-pound bomb on a refugee camp? Like, what is the careful way to do a thing, the only purpose of which is to kill everybody? Like, I just don't know what he's envisaging in this instance, because I just don't see a different way that they could do the killing of everybody in a careful way, right? The second thing is, he says we're going to keep at it. We're going to keep working on this, like as if he's trying to paint the US as like deeply concerned that Palestinians are being killed, in entire, like, by the building, and that it troubles him greatly, and that they're really trying hard to stop this, when we know that they have literally never said no to a weapons transfer since October, and they have only done everything in their power to provide Israel with the weapons, with the financing, with the intelligence cooperation, with the diplomatic cover, is precisely only because of the US policy on this that Israel has been able to kill Palestinians the way that it has. So to say that we're working on this when they're the reason for this is extremely disingenuous. I don't know what it's going to take for the US politicians to wake up and realize that you cannot have conversations about protecting civilians when you do not advocate for their total freedom on their land. Protection means freedom. It doesn't mean bomb us in a different way. It doesn't mean starve us in a different way. It doesn't mean ensure that we cannot have live in our homes on our land. It doesn't mean, condemn us to a life of living in tents for generation after generation, and a life of forced displacement and uprootedness. It doesn't mean any of that. It means freedom. And just the blind spot in US policy, the total blind spot, that the issue here is the lack of Palestinian freedom, and that you cannot advocate for protection of Palestinian civilians if you do not advocate for our freedom. For some reason, when we talk about Palestinians, we can have conversations about their protection, but what we really mean is just to like kill them in different ways, kill them a little bit less.
Yes. Yes, John Kirby, he doesn't even dispute that Palestinians are being murdered indiscriminately by this Zionist Nazi regime. He doesn't even want to stop the murders. In his statement, he just wants the murders to be a little more precise.
But also to say they've taken some steps to be more precise. So it's an admission that everything up until now has been completely imprecise, completely indiscriminate. You can't read it and think anything but the Palestinian people have been condemned in the eyes of the Western political media elite to erasure, to annihilation. That's it. There's just no connection to reality in these statements coming out of the Biden administration. In parallel, you have reporters asking Biden spokespeople on a near daily basis whether the guy is psychologically functioning in a normal way, whether he is coherent, whether he has Parkinson's, whether he has dementia. And literal spokespeople.
Yeah, and he's like, how dare you ask those questions, and where is my ice cream?
But have you seen, like, I think her name's Corrine, I'm not sure, one of the spokespeople?
Yeah. Oh, she had a good one where she was like, I hope you asked that same question about the other guy. And it's like the other guy wasn't slurring his words like he was blacked out drunk. Like the other guy didn't sound intelligent, but at least he completed full sentences. And that really should not be the barometer of whether or not you get to be president.
Yeah, of whether or not you have the nuclear codes, right? Like it should not be can you conduct a full sentence? Like the nobody anywhere else is allowed to be that incompetent and that not skilled at their job that is that important and keep their job.
I don't know. The IOF keep getting sniped like fucking ducks. They're setting up literal curtains where their outposts are, and it's like a sniper's wet dream.
Do you know what she said, which cracked me up? She was like, "Did he have a bad night?" Yeah, he had a bad
Yeah,
night.
yeah, yeah.
He had a bad night. Everybody has bad nights.
Does he know the Muffin Man? Sure. He
Ah,
lives in Drury Lane. Next question. And then you see they trot out AOC like recently, and they're like, it's a done deal, okay? He's staying in the race. The actual conversation has not even like it's shifted from is he mentally fit to like should he stay in the race, because people have eyes and ears, and we can see that this man not fit to be president.
he's not fit to like live alone. I don't think he's not fit to like take care of himself on a daily basis. Like he
When your wife is congratulating you on finishing all of your sentences after the debate, she's like, did you see he answered all the questions? It's like, is he a literal child? I know you that you support a diaper army, but is he in diapers? Like,
right. Yes.
that was a bar.
That was a bar, yeah. That whole thing is weird, and it's just weird that every press conference has to do with that during a time when the US is continuing to support and fund and arm a live stream genocide. It's just weird. It's like, what is going on here? It's enough to make any normal human being go completely mad.
Yeah, if your brain works correctly, this all sucks, dude.
Yeah.
But I want to have, I do have some good news.
Oh, bring it on.
So the occupation's Nazi army is losing morale and losing steam. Okay. Even one of their Zionist terrorist leaders, Yitzhak Brick, has said, and I quote, the occupation cannot win against Hamas or Hezbollah. Quote, every day the situation worsens, claiming that the occupation and the IOF are destined for collapse. The Zionists hide their casualties because they are cowards and they don't want to decrease the already eroding morale. Official numbers are like, whose line is it anyway? Because this shit is all made up. But in May, they finally claimed the loss of 766 terrorists. Many thousands have been sent home missing limbs. Over 900 IOF members have already requested to be discharged, and that's up from an average of around 200 per year. Many of them have already fled without telling their superiors. In addition, they are having to call up reserves and are even trying to draft Orthodox Jews into military service. These are people who have literally never held a gun in their life. And that's how folks would describe most of the ones already committing genocide in Gaza. They're really good at making TikToks, but TikToks are not how battles are fought and won. The occupation has lost control of the north of occupied Palestine, and there are towns like Metula that are abandoned by settlers. He's a general in their terrorist occupation army, and he's saying that the leaders of the war cabinet, right, the Gallants, the Netanyahus, they are leading the occupation to their end. And I so agree. You love to hear it. Mashallah. The occupation is known for wearing diapers because they are too scared to get out of their tanks to use the restroom like adult humans.
Do they actually wear diapers?
Yes, they literally wear diapers, and then when they are in like desolate areas, they all burn the like trash, the diapers, because they're too scared to get out of their
What?
tanks.
Wait, I thought
They're
the diaper.
fucking
Hold,
cowards.
hold on,
You
hold
thought
on.
it was a joke?
I
No,
thought the
they're
diaper.
literally like sponsored by Pampers. I don't know if that's
I
true,
thought.
but
I okay that. I thought the diaper army thing was literally just people being like, "You're incompetent, so
no,
you wear diapers." Like I thought that's what the joke was.
no, they literally wear
They
diapers
literally
because
wear
they are
diapers.
too terrified to get out of their tanks, of their
Wow.
armored vehicles, and use the
Mhm.
restroom like
So it's
human beings.
not
They're
a
literally
joke.
calling Palestinians animals
Mm,
and then shitting on themselves in a tank.
okay, that's wild. I did not
Yeah.
realize it was real. I thought it was
Yeah,
just
dude.
like a, "You guys must wear diapers because 'cause you're incompetent."
No, but that is why Joe
Whoa.
Biden loves them and relates to them.
Because they both wear diapers.
I shit myself at the debate. Don't tell Trump. Trump's like,
Uh,
I could smell it, I think. I don't know.
I had one other thing. I don't know if you paid attention to this headline on CNN from Tuesday, July 9th. Ukrainian children's hospital attacked as Russian strikes kill at least 39. So, remember how in the beginning of the Gaza genocide, Palestinians, and in particular Palestinian lawyers and legal experts, including myself, told you that whatever the world let Israel get away with in Gaza was going to become a new precedent and applied to situations all around the world simply because Israel got away with it and nobody stepped up to stop Israel or hold them accountable? Do you guys remember that? Well, now we are actually seeing this come to fruition with a Russian airstrike on a Ukrainian children's hospital. Because prior to this, the only recent example of a country bombing a children's hospital was Israel. We're going to continue to see more of that. We're going to continue to see a lot more of that because Israel has not been held accountable. So it's, open season here for bad actors all around the world to carry out this new precedent of dismantling, attacking, destroying the entire healthcare infrastructure of a people. And what we have seen with this Russian airstrike on a Ukrainian children's hospital is just the beginning.
Media, when the Russians bombed a Ukrainian children's hospital, immediately knew who bombed it and put that in the headline, right? But anytime there's a hospital that the occupation destroys in Gaza, the media forgets who did it. And they're just like, the hospital was destroyed. It miraculously combusted. There's no culprit for it. You know how hospitals just be blowing up.
I mean, this happens all the time. So we have a recent example from a couple of weeks ago where you have the New York Times on June 23rd, which published a headline: "Strike on area where displaced Gazans were camped kills up to 25." You would think that they were camping for fun. Like, why are we camping? Like, we're camped. We're not camped. They bombed all of our homes. Like, we're not camping. But then also, like, what is this strike? Like, where did it come from? Who's the strike from? Like, why is it just a strike? I've also seen in some mainstream media headlines recently the usage of Gaza strike. So almost like alluding to the fact that the strike is coming from within ourselves and like we're killing ourselves. And then, of course, the erasure of the term Gazans as a means to erase the Palestinianness of the people in Gaza. And I made this comment on a recent post where I noted that I began to hate the word Gazan when I made my, account online years ago, and I said, "Oh, I'll be Gazan girl." Um, I didn't realize that one day they would actually use the word Gazan as a means to erase the Palestinian identity of the people in Gaza. Right? You can be from a place, a city, a region, and have an identity from that region, but that doesn't mean that that's your entire national or ethnic or cultural identity. The people in Gaza are Palestinian. And there was a recent article by a Palestinian that wrote, like, I'm not Gazan, I'm a Palestinian from Gaza. And now I've started to hate my own name because of the way that the word Gazan has been used by the mainstream media to erase the Palestinianness and to manipulate who we are and to disconnect us and to disconnect what is happening in terms of this genocide from the broader Palestinian freedom struggle. Main headline of this article that says strike on area where displaced Gazans were camped kills up to 25. The main headline was Middle East crisis. It's like, when are we going to move past these headlines that just make it sound like the Middle East is just this region which is just naturally ravaged by violence for no reason other than the fact that the people who live there are just destined to be killed all the time, has nothing to do with us. It's just a regional crisis without any external influence, you know? It's just totally disingenuous.
Jerusalem Post did publish a opinion piece that questions, is God an anti-Semite? So that is where we are with the conversation.
Yeah.
Then there was also like a headline that was like, there's a dispute in the ceasefire talks where the occupation wants a ceasefire where they don't actually cease fire and they still have the ability to like murder people. And then Hamas proposed a ceasefire where you actually cease fire, right? Where people are stopped from being murdered. And then the headline is like, both sides are not helping. So anyways, just be very critical of the media you consume. Folks, that has been another episode of the Palestine Pod. Thank you all so much for listening. Find our full episodes and sources at www.palestinepod.com. Follow us on Instagram at thepalestinepod. Send us an email at palestinepod@gmail.com and look for us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/palestinepod. That's been another episode of the podcast. Thank y'all so much for listening. Have as good a day as you can.
We can start telling people to join the Patreon. The show wouldn't be possible without a Patreon. You got to get on our Patreon. Support us on Patreon. You can, because like I've been watching all these other podcasts and they just keep plugging Patreon like all the time.
Yeah, I'm going to clip what you just did right now.
Okay.